Hello, and welcome to ARTFul Insights. My name is Shane Farrell, and I am the Digital Projects and Programs Manager for ARTZ Philadelphia. Today, you and I are going to spend about 30 to 40 minutes looking at a piece of art together. This video is produced in partnership between Dementia Society of America and ARTZ Philadelphia. Each month, we offer a live program online with a small group of people joining together to talk about works of art from different museums and cultural centers around the country. It's a different museum or cultural center every month. And then in addition to that live program, we produce a video like the one that you're watching right now. We look at the same works of art that we do in the live program. The difference is the video is about 30 to 40 minutes in length, and you can watch it anytime, day or night, that suits you. It's an opportunity to have a more intimate, self-driven conversation about the art. I'll ask a few questions to get us started. I'll give you a few things to think about, and I'll share some of the observations and thoughts that folks who joined our live program brought up. Just things that I think might be interesting for you to consider. But really, the video is about you and whatever you see in these works of art, how you respond to them, and just having an opportunity to look at a work of art and think about it at your own pace. If you're watching this video with someone, please feel free to pause from time to time and have your own conversation. If you're watching by yourself, we're delighted to have you, and it'll be a conversation just between the two of us. So, without further ado, I'll introduce you to the museum or cultural center we'll be visiting today. So, here we are at the museum we're visiting today. This is the Bainbridge Island Museum of Art. They're located, as you'd expect, on Bainbridge Island in Washington State. They were started in 2009. That's kind of when the museum germinated as an idea, and then they officially opened their doors in 2013. The museum focuses on contemporary art and craft from artists from the Puget Sound region, where they're located in Washington. And they try to put an emphasis on diverse and lesser-known artists from that area. One of the words they use to describe themselves is community-centered, because they're deeply embedded in the local community in their area and focus on art from that area. They're also very education-forward as a museum. They run a number of educational programs, including programs for people who are living with memory loss. And if you ever happen to be in Washington and you want to visit the Bainbridge Museum, it's a free museum. It's always free to the public, so you can walk right in anytime you'd like and take a look at some art. So now that we've learned a little bit about the museum, why don't we take a look at the work of art that we're going to be looking at today? So here's the work of art that we're going to be taking a look at today. And before I say anything about this work, I want to just give you a chance to look it over, see what draws your eye in first. What are some of the first things you notice about this? What's jumping out at you and grabbing your attention? So we'll give you a moment to just look over the piece, see what you see, and then we'll get started talking about it together. So, as you got a chance to look this piece over, what were some of the first things that jumped out at you? Was it the colors of the piece? Maybe the sense of light? Maybe the setting? Or the two figures that are occupying the setting? I would love to hear what you noticed first. When we had our group live version of this program over Zoom a little bit ago, one of the first things that some members of our group noticed was that to them, this piece looked like a photograph. One participant said, "It looks like a photograph," and everyone else kind of agreed right away. What do you think? Does this look like a photograph to you? If we were to zoom out slightly, does that make the piece look more like a photograph, less like a photograph? Or maybe you don't even agree that it looks like a photograph in the first place. What about when we zoom in a little bit? When we get close to this piece, does it still look like a photograph to us? Or something different? Well, one of our participants observed, and I think this is pretty insightful about just the style of painting that we're looking at here. He said, when you look at this from far away, and when you look at it at first, it really does look like it could be a photograph. But when he started to look closer at the piece, and he said specifically, when he started to look at the face of this figure here, it started to become more clear that this was a painting. So as we zoom in here, what are some things that we notice that might be telling us that this piece might actually be a painting? Is it something about the color? Are there brush strokes that we're noticing, or kind of painterly flourishes? What are the details about this that make it clear what the medium might be? And one of our participants went on to wonder if perhaps this artist had painted this piece from a photograph. So perhaps they were sitting in their studio and they had a picture that they were looking at as a reference for this painting. And sometimes a painting can come out a little bit different depending on what you're looking at. Some people like to paint from life, where they sit in person in front of whatever they're painting, and they paint from reality. Some people like to use photographs as references when they paint. Do you think this artist was using a photograph as a reference? Or do you think they might have been actually sitting here in this place with these people and painting them from life? And are there specific things about it that make you think it might be one or the other? Sometimes when something is painted from a photograph, the colors might look a little bit different. Sometimes when something is painted from a photograph, the artist might have a little more time to be more precise because they don't have people in front of them who are moving around and doing things the way you and I might be right now. It's a little more difficult to be precise when you're dealing with a living human being in a changing environment. So what do you think this might be? Is it painted from a photograph or painted from life? As we continued on in our conversation, we started to talk a lot about the environment in this painting and whether we found it inviting or not. Do you find this to be an inviting sort of environment? Is this somewhere you think you would like to spend some time? Most of our participants said, yes, this did seem inviting to them. It's one of the first things they brought up is how inviting this environment seemed. It seemed like a nice place to spend time on a sunny day. One of our participants said, I think it's very inviting. I would love to be here reading a book, doing a puzzle, or just chatting and enjoying the scene. And everyone else agreed. Then another one of our participants, who's a bit of a jokester, said, well, there's one thing missing. And we said, what's missing? We're not sure what's missing. He said, a bottle of wine and wine glasses. Another participant added another word beyond inviting. They said that this piece seemed tranquil to them, which is sort of different than inviting. Inviting could mean warm and comfortable, whereas tranquil could mean peaceful and meditative. Is this a place you think is peaceful? Do you think if you were spending time here, you would be feeling in a calm and peaceful mood? And perhaps there are things about the environment that would make you feel that way. If we were sitting here, are there certain things that we think we might hear or see or even smell that would contribute to that feeling of peacefulness or of tranquility? What do you think? What if you were sitting here, if you put yourself in the place that this painting is depicting, what do you think you might hear, see, or smell even? A few things I think we might hear in this place, and perhaps you have some different suggestions. I'm sure some better ones than I do. I think we might hear perhaps the sound of some birds calling in the distance. We might hear the sound of waves lapping up against the shore. Perhaps we'd even hear other people who might be out on boats or sitting on the shore of this body of water we're looking at here, who are also enjoying their time outside. Is there anything that you hear in particular when you're here? And perhaps going beyond that, I mentioned things we might see or smell. Maybe we would be smelling salt air. Maybe this is on the ocean. Or do you think that this isn't salt water, this is a lake or a river or something of that nature? And as we continue to think about nature and place, we started to wonder where this might be. And one of our participants said, I think this is Lake George, which is a lake in New York. Another participant mentioned that they were somewhere in Seattle, and there was an island, and it was on the water, and there were mountains in the distance, and it was very beautiful. And this painting reminded them of that place they had visited in Seattle. I wonder if this reminds you of anywhere that you've been before. Is there something about this environment that looks familiar to you? Does this body of water evoke any places you've been before, or perhaps some of the things we see in the distance. Or perhaps you've been to a house like this where you have a deck, like the one here, where you can sit out directly on water. Have you ever been somewhere like that where you were at a house that had a deck that was right on the edge of water? When we continued looking around the painting, one of our participants focused in right here. I'll draw a little box so we can see a little more clearly. Right here on this object here. And does this look familiar to you? This thing here that this figure over here is resting their feet on? Does this look like something you've seen before? Well, one of our participants told a story of what this object reminded her of. She said it reminded her of when she was just married to her husband and they were trying to find furniture for the place they lived in. So they went outside and they found some spools, some wooden spools that had wire wrapped around them. And she said this reminded her of those wooden spools. So they found these spools, they took off the remaining wire, and they brought the big wooden piece into their house. And they painted them and decorated them. And she said they actually made wonderful pieces of furniture. Have you ever done something like this where you've found something that maybe was intended for one purpose? In the case of this story, our participant told us it was just a spool intended for holding construction materials like wire, and she made it into a piece of furniture. Have you ever done something like this where you've transformed an object from what it was meant to be into something else? Some people would call this DIY, for do it yourself. I think probably a lot of us have done this before, where we've taken something and changed its purpose. Something maybe discarded became useful to us. Like the famous saying we'll all be familiar with, one man's trash is another man's treasure. And that's something kind of interesting about art in general. Sometimes we can find something that's meant to be one thing and see it in a new way and transform it through art. Is there anything that this painting does for you where you're able to see something in a new way? We then went on to discuss more of the furniture in this painting. And someone said the chairs and this little table or ottoman here kind of looked like white wicker Victorian furniture. And another person said the table and chairs, or the ottoman and chairs, whatever this object might be here, look like they might be part of a matching set. So that's kind of an interesting contrast. We have what might be a spool of wire that's been repurposed here. And then we have furniture that looks like it might be something you'd buy at a store or from a artisan. So there's kind of a hodgepodge here, found things and purchased things, and a contrast of craft and found object. And maybe that tells us something about the people in this painting, or the kind of place that they might be in. What do you think it might tell us about this house that we're looking at, assuming this is a house and not just a dock? And what do you think it might tell us about the people here? Perhaps it means they're kind of laid back. There's a little bit of this, a little bit of that, some furniture, some old used construction materials that we're repurposing into a table. There's all sorts of things we could start to wonder about these people and their home just based on looking at the furniture. Another thing we started looking at was the sense of light in this painting. Is there anything you notice about the light here? Where do we think the sun would be positioned? And based on that, what time of day do we think it might be? If we look over here, we can see some white areas, which might indicate the sun kind of glimmering off the surface of the water. And if we look on the ground here, we can see all these darker areas, which are perhaps the shadows cast by all of the furniture and the railings. When we look at all the different clues we have here about light, what do we think it shows us? One of our participants said, well, based on the shadows I see here and the fact that these two figures are wearing jackets, I think it might be later in the day where the sun is starting to go down and will eventually come down past this green area here. So we're seeing those long shadows that you sometimes see later in the day when the sun is starting to go down. Some of our participants agreed, though another participant said maybe it's morning and the sun is just starting to come up in that direction, which might also cast some long shadows and produce some glimmering on the surface of the water. What time of day do you think it might be? Do you agree with the participants in our group? When you look around at the painting, are there other things you notice about the light? Are there bright and dark areas that stand out to you? And what do you think they tell us about what's going on with the sun or any other sources of light there might be here? As we were looking at the light, one of our participants said, I love the dark green of the trees. I think she was referring to this area here, juxtaposed with the bright, glimmering water right here. She thought it made a very nice, clean line right across this area right here, kind of straight across there. And she was drawn to that juxtaposition of color and tone. Is there anything in this painting that you feel similarly about? Are there combinations of colors or of brights and darks that you find are drawing you in to certain areas of this painting? What colors are you noticing as you look around? Does anything stand out to you? And what are some of the brightest areas and some of the darkest areas? Are they drawing your eye? And are there areas of contrast where there's bright next to dark? That's sort of what drew our participant to the area I was just pointing out. Back here, the bright and the blue against the dark greenish colors back here. I'd be curious to hear which areas you're drawn to in the painting as a result of colors and darkness and lightness. So we spent all of this time looking at this painting, and we were mostly talking about the environment, the place, and some of you are probably wondering, why aren't we talking about these two, the two figures in the painting? What do we think about these two figures here that are perhaps sitting on this deck or dock? What do we notice about them? And based on what we notice about them, what do we think the relationship between them might be? We talked a tiny bit about them. We talked about their coat, the fact that they're wearing coats, or some sort of long-sleeved garment. Perhaps they're not coats. Perhaps you think they're something else. And that's very possible. But when we look at these two figures, what do we notice about them? Is there something that jumps out at you first about these two? One of our participants said, well, they look very relaxed and comfortable around each other. Would you agree with that? Do you think they look relaxed and comfortable? And what is it that gives us the sense that they might be relaxed and comfortable? What is it about their body language, the way they're sitting, and how they're angled, that might indicate their level of comfort with each other? Well, the figure that we see right here has their feet up on the table, which might indicate that they're pretty relaxed, and they're sort of leaning back into what looks like it might be a comfortable chair. And the same with the figure over here. They've got their feet up, and they're just sitting back. So perhaps that means they're relaxed, they're comfortable, they've spent a lot of time with each other. And one of our participants said, I think they're a couple. I think they're just enjoying being together. They don't really have to talk or do anything in particular. They're just sitting and enjoying each other's company. Do you agree with that? Do you think these people might be a couple? And do you think they're enjoying being around each other? And how can we tell whether they might be enjoying being around each other or not? Why don't we take a little bit of a closer look at them? So when we zoom in here, is there more that you notice about these people? Is there more that we could say about their relationship? What draws you in here? What do you see when we get a little bit closer to them? Do these look like people who are relaxing, or is there something else going on? Is there more tension in the picture that we're not picking up on? Or perhaps these people don't know each other at all. Who knows? What do you think? And as we look closer at them, perhaps we can revisit some of the questions we've been asking ourselves all throughout our time looking at this piece. What are the areas of color and light that we notice, of bright and dark? What sort of medium does this look like it's in? Do we agree that we think this is probably a painting, which seemed to be our consensus in the group? Or when we look closer, do we notice something else? Are there textures that we notice throughout the piece? Perhaps down here there's a unique texture, or up here where the water is. And what does that texture tell us? Well, there's all sorts of things that we can notice as we look around a painting. Perhaps there are things that I've brought up today that you might not have looked at otherwise. And perhaps there are things you've noticed about the painting that I haven't even touched on at all. Is there anything I haven't brought up that you think is very important about this piece of art? I would always love to hear what your thoughts are about what's interesting about this, what's fun to discuss about this, what do we notice about this? We want to hear what you're thinking. So, as we take kind of a final look at this, what are you thinking? What are the things about this that you connect with? And as we ponder that question, I just want to give you a little information about this piece of art and the artist that made it. So, the painting we looked at today is by an artist named Kurt Salmson, and it's called Labor Day. So perhaps these two people we see sitting here are enjoying a holiday, enjoying some time off from work. It was painted in 2012. It's oil on linen, and it's 70 by 50 inches. Salmson was known as a plein air painter, which is just a fancy way of saying he usually painted from life. So perhaps this was painted from life rather than a photograph, though who knows? He generally painted his friends and family in different settings in the Puget Sound region of Washington. So perhaps this painting is somewhere in Washington State being depicted here, though I don't think we can be 100% certain. The artist even often painted from his own home, which is on the water in the Puget Sound region. So it's possible that this could be his own home with his own friends or family sitting there. It's interesting to wonder more about the painting when we learn more about the artist. This artist also has a local connection. He grew up in Philadelphia and studied at PAFA. So despite the fact that we're all the way over in Washington, there's a connection to our local place, Arts Philadelphia, here in Philly, PA. So before we go, I want to give a huge thanks to Kristen Tollefson, who helped put this program together. She works at the Bainbridge Island Museum, and this program would not have been possible without her. As always, we want to thank our partners at the Dementia Society of America. And most of all, I want to thank you for being here and spending some time with me looking at this piece of art together. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope you might come back again and look at some of the other works of art we've seen throughout our ARTFul Insights program. And perhaps you'll also join us for the live program we have that takes place over Zoom with a group discussion. We would love to see you there. It takes place every month, and you can find more information on our events calendar on our website at artsphilly.org. I hope you enjoyed your time today. I know that I did. And thanks once again for joining us for ARTFul Insights.